Hello, everybody. This is Brian O'Haron. We're a few weeks away from the election, local election on November 8th, a Tuesday, 2011. We're going to be talking about that from week to week up until the election. Tonight will be no exception. You see a sign I put up on the screen called Free Stuff. You hear that a lot nowadays at the national, state, and local level. Everybody wants free stuff. And people are always asking me what my opinion is about what's happening in the world economically, what's happening in the United States economically, what's happening in the state economically, and what's happening here locally, where we have more control over things than they do at the other levels. And I always say to them, and this is a very simple explanation, economists will take hours and hours and hours to say the same thing, but I'm just trying to boil it down here for the public. And I have all kinds of people watch the program, students, seniors, politicians, normal, everyday, hard workers. All kinds of people stop me and talk to me and say they watch the program, especially around election time. So what I want to say is that democracies are wonderful. No argument about that. We're all products of this democracy one way or another if we've been here a while. People break down our door to get into this country. Right now, the door is often open. They don't even have to break it down. They can get in, not even be a citizen, and get plenty of free stuff from us. Happens in other countries too. But because everybody wants to come to the country, and because we have been so successful in the past, we have a lot of people asking for free stuff. And my view is that democracies are kind of doomed to fail over a long period of time, because as everybody gets the vote, which everybody can under certain circumstances, more people vote for free stuff. And if you get more people voting for free stuff, then you have people supplying the free stuff. Then you get in a real pickle. And you get to the point where you float towards socialism, which we're beginning to do now, my opinion. And you get to the point where you're giving away more free stuff to people, some of which they earn, some of which they don't. They don't always earn it at a very competitive interest rate either. But as we float that way, and then on, of course, to communism. There isn't much communism anymore, because I think a lot of people have learned their lesson there. And you get so far into socialism, like England and Germany and France and other places, that you can't afford it anymore. So you have to start coming backwards. And you have to say, we have to give away less free stuff to people. And that's tough, because a lot of people worked all their life thinking they were going to get some of this free stuff. And then we begin to curtail it in their retirement years. Pretty tough for people. And then, if you take away enough of this free stuff, then you might get rioting in the streets like we have in some places in the world. And you might get revolutions and things like that. So that's not out of the question over a long period of time. Now, my granddad Carmelo Russo, came from Sicily. I'm the product of a marriage between a Sicilian mother, who was actually Maltese, but her father was Sicilian. She came from Malta. He came from Sicily. My grandmother also came from Malta. And an Irish family that came from Ireland. And that was a no-no when I was a kid. Italians always said, don't marry an Irishman. The Irishmen always said, don't marry an Italian. So anyway, whenever you say don't, then people want to do. So anyway, they got married, and I was the first child. And I spent a lot of time around my grandfather. He was a barber. He started at the age of 7 as an apprentice in Italy, actually Sicily, sweeping the floor. Then he worked his way up to become a master barber. He went to Malta, met my grandmother, and then came to America. He saved up for 2 years to bring my mother and my grandmother to America. And my grandfather was the first fiscal conservative that I ever met. He used to say to me, Brian, nothing's free. You have to work for everything. You have to earn before you spend. If you don't, you could get into very serious financial trouble. So at that time, the seeds were being sown for me becoming a fiscal conservative, and since the age of 11, trying to earn before I spent. Now, my mom and dad, they were fiscal conservatives, but not by choice. They did the best they could during the Depression, during the wars. My granddad did the best he could. He invested his money wisely. In those days, he invested a lot in communication stocks like the phone company and the power company and stuff like that. And he did quite well for himself. And the way they did it in those days is they tried to live a pretty good conservative lifestyle. He never owned a car. And then pass on as much money as they could to their children. He had 5 that lived. He had 8 altogether. 5 lived. And he passed on that money to his children when he died at the age of 85 or so. And guess what? That helped them in their retirement. They in turn try to pass on some of their savings to their children when they passed away. So my parents were fiscal conservatives, but not by choice. Joyce's parents were fiscal conservatives, but not by choice. They did the best. My mom's favorite saying was, you can never get ahead. As soon as you think you're getting ahead with a raise or some more money, then up go the prices. Inflation was around. There were all kinds of problems around the Depression and World War II and following wars. But they did all right. They tried not to rely on others. They all worked for a living, worked hard, were honest people. And now, Joyce and I have kind of done the same thing. We've worked all our life, traveled a lot, took advantage of opportunity, and we've earned money along the way. And now when people call me from around the world and say, Brian, what are you doing? Where are you? I'll say, I'm up at Highland Lake in Winston, Connecticut, spending the money that I earned. And early in life, when I had a financial advisor, in the days when most people didn't have one, what he said was, Brian, the first problem is earning the money. and investing it and making it grow and not going broke. I think that's one of the biggest fears people have that have been poor at one time, is not going broke. But he said your next problem is going to be giving as much money away to people of your choice, whether they be charities, family members, etc., before you die. Because if you don't do that, the government will take a good percentage of it. And we all know that you can spend the money much more wisely and efficiently than the government can. So we have a little bit of a problem like that in our town. We have it everywhere else too, as I said earlier. We've got to make sure that we don't spend before we earn. And we have to make sure that what we do spend is spent efficiently. So with that, I now want to talk a bit about the 7th and 8th grade move to Gilbert. Now, I sat through all the meetings that they had with the Board of Education, Gilbert, and the K through 8 people. They had public hearings. They had their own board meetings. I sat through all those on purpose, because I knew, as many of my forefathers did in this town, that we weren't spending as wisely, as economically, as efficiently as we perhaps could in these schools, and they were 65% of our budget. So they went through all the meetings, and they talked about moving 7th and 8th grade to the Gilbert School, because at the time the Gilbert School had about 350 students. It was built for 850 students, give or take, back before Region and around Region 7's birth there, when we had those towns coming here. So a third full up there in a fairly modern school, in a big 100-acre campus with a lot of good facilities. Why not move 7th and 8th up there? So the fiscal conservatives, the 5 Republicans that were in before in the last term, and 3 this term, plus 1 Democrat, Lisa Smith, were trying to crack through the shell of this Board of Education to find out exactly how the money was being spent. Now, this has been going on for 20 years, maybe more. A lot of people would complain that they couldn't see what was happening there under the covers. They didn't know how the money was being spent, and they could see a lot of signs that perhaps it wasn't being spent wisely. That's K through 8, especially, and perhaps Gilbert as well. So they pursued that course over the last 4 years, and the decision was finally made, aided by a lot by one of our 3 town managers in the last 2 years, Wayne Dove, who also knew that there were plenty of savings in that 65% of the budget that would then help the rest of the budget, the town, fund balance, and things like that. So he pushed very, very hard while he was here. Wasn't here that long, but he was a big, big help in getting us to the point we're at now. But anyway, the parents, they questioned whether or not it was good to move the children to Gilbert. Some of the teachers questioned that as well. Some of the Board of Education members were trying to send the kids to Torrington or to Region 7 or East Jabru or wherever else they could go to try to get the cost down for the average cost per student. Well, the 7th and 8th grade move has happened. And as usual, we're finding out, and I'm told this by many people, I'm sure there's some problems too, I don't have any official information, but unofficially, everybody says the students from 7th and 8th grade love being at Gilbert. Surprise, surprise. Even some of the teachers that were moved from K through 8 up to Gilbert enjoy being at Gilbert. They have new books up there. They have, plenty of facilities up there. So the news is beginning to spread that the kids are happy there and the teachers are happy there. And the Gilbert family has embraced the 7th and 8th grade, and we're hoping that they can help get their test scores up for the 7th and 8th pupils so that when they go to Gilbert, they go in at a higher level of competency as the kids from St. Anthony's do. So that has been very, very successful. It's very early in the game. There's probably some growing pains there, I wouldn't doubt that. But all in all, this looks like it has been a success. And not only that, but it has saved about $3,000 on the cost per student, which I'm just going to give you a round number here. It's gone from about $16,000 per student to about $13,000. Now there's some change involved in that. It might be a little more than 13, might have been a little more or less than 16, but we've taken a big, and since there's now 540 students up there, and you're saving $3,000 roughly per student, you're talking some big dollars here that can be more wisely spent. Also, if we can finally get off the dime and close one of the old school buildings, that'll save us another somewhere between $250,000 and $600,000 over time per year. That money can be spent more wisely. Perhaps more teachers can be hired. Some of it can be moved over to the town side of the budget. Some can be put in the fund balance. And some can be used to improve the test scores where practical. So I wanted to say that tonight because I do know that people are going out knocking on doors now, the fiscal conservatives especially. I talk to them, and they're getting false information. There'll be a couple examples of that tonight on this program where I'm going to try to help straighten out some of that. But the Gilbert thing is a success. Time will tell how successful. Takes time for things to really settle into place and everybody get any of this short-term kinks out, which we do expect some. That's management by exception. So we're all happy with that. I haven't heard any complaints so far. And if anybody has any complaints, please let these people know as they're knocking on your door asking for your vote in the November 8th election. The big spenders will be knocking on your door, wanting more money to build a new school, wanting more money for the K through 6. And the fiscal conservatives will also be knocking on your door, trying to explain to you why we need to run the town and the schools efficiently for the foreseeable future until we can get this stagnant revenue, profitable, recurring tax revenue increased, which is a long way off, believe me. Now, I can tell you that if you don't vote these fiscal conservatives into office, the 4-year positive trend will most likely stop. So be very careful when you cast your vote. because I don't think the big spenders will continue in this direction, and they'll be putting us more on the road to more free stuff that we, the town, can't afford. We've got to run an efficient, tight operation for the foreseeable future. Now I'm going to present a different slide to try to correct some other impressions. And Marcia Sterling, who's running for selectman as a fiscal conservative on the Republican, with the Republicans, row B, was out knocking on doors with some other of the fiscal conservatives, at least one, maybe more. And somebody said to her, when she asked questions and presented herself, well, I'm not so sure I'm happy with you, fiscal conservatives, because my child's going to have 30-something students in his classroom, or her classroom, whatever. So Marcia sent an email to the K through 6, pre-K through 6 superintendent, and he fired her back just a few days ago an email. I asked her for a copy of the email, and unless I made a mistake transcribing it here, and I don't think I did, I checked it a few times, up to a day or two ago, these were the kinds of information that our K through pre-K through 6 had. I'll read it to you. So up the top line, we got the grade number, and down under that is pre-K through 6. Then we have the number of students in each grade, 22 down through 96 there. Then we have the number of teachers for those 22 students, or 86, for the 22 students, 4 teachers for the 86, etc. I'll read those off in a minute. And then we have the pupil-teacher ratio. So I'm going to show you roughly how many students are pre-K through 6, and how many teachers there are, and what the ratio is. So pre-kindergarten, 22 students, 2 teachers. That's 11 children per class, per teacher rather. Kindergarten, 86 students, 4 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 21.5 students in that grade. Grade 1, 92 students, 4 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 23 students. Grade 2, 86, 4 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 21.5 students. Grade 3, 93 students, 4 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 23.25 students. Grade 4, 96 students, 4 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 24 students. Grade 5, 116 students, 5 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 23.2 students. Grade 6, 96 students, 4 teachers. That's 1 teacher for every 24 students. Now, the numbers that are being tossed around by the big spenders mainly, and the other people that are running against the fiscal conservatives, seems to be about 30 per class. They're telling people, I see it in the paper, oh, we're going to have 30 people per class. Now, these are the numbers now. If we don't let any teachers go, they'll remain the numbers, give or take, as people leave school and quit or whatever, when new people come, or new teachers are hired or let go, either one. And the fiscal conservatives don't believe that we will have to lay off a lot of teachers, because they think, it still has to be proven, they think that we're going to be all right here with the minimum budget requirement, because we're going to give the $18.6 million that we voted in at the town budget meeting, annual town budget meeting, and then we will get quite a bit of money from state grants of various sorts, the biggest of which is the ECS grant, which is up around $950,000 or so, give or take. I don't know exact number here. And they firmly believe that, as I said it when I read my letter last week, that they will be able to apply this. Now, worst case, of course, is that they can't, and then we'll have to go out and we'll have to raise the taxes, probably about 7%, maybe more or less. Or we'll have to raise the taxes less and take money from the town side, because $600,000 or so was given to them when they balanced this budget. Or we'll have to take some money from the fund balance. So it has to be a mixture of all three of those things. But the fiscal conservatives do not believe that will be necessary. They're negotiating with the state. They believe they're going to be okay. And my advice to you would be to vote them into office again so they can continue this 4-year quest to resolve these budget problems we have in our education, audit problems, budget problems, spending problems, efficiency problems. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be in for a big, big surprise in your future taxes. If you can afford it, no problem. If you can't afford it, I advise you to vote your pocketbook, as any sensible fiscal conservative would do, and force this education system we have to manage its money efficiently in a very transparent, open manner, so that everybody knows what's happening and can vote for it one way or the other. It's also very important that the finance director in our town understands what's going on, what the numbers are, and has faith in them and trust, because he handles all the money in town. He signs most of the checks one way or another. So it's very important that you're aware of this and that you consider it on November 8th when you go to the polls. Now, I'm going to read to you an attachment to the letter that I didn't read last week. I got so carried away with the reading and commenting on the letter from the state that I forgot to read the attachment, and I was told that by the help here at the studio when I finished the program. Hey, why didn't you read the attachment? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the attachment, if I can find it here, to the letter that came on September 7th from the state to the town in answer of Kevin Nelligan's letter that he had sent them. Attachment. You won't be able to read this. I'll read it to you. The attachment, 2011-2012 minimum budget determination pursuant to Section 1 of Public Act 11-234. A. The base MBR, minimum budget requirement. Pursuant to Section 1 of Public Act 11-234, comma, the 2011-12 MBR shall equal the 2010-11 budgeted appropriation or appropriations, either one, to the Board of Education, plus any applicable reductions concerning the 2010-2011 federal state fiscal stabilization funds, SFSF, that supported the Education Cost Sharing, ECS, grant. B. Reductions to the MBR, minimum budget requirement, under certain circumstances. Legislation provides for potential reductions to the MBR. Number 1. If your district's October 2010 resident student count is less than the October 2009 count, your MBR is reduced by $3,000 for each such reduced count. However, the maximum reduction under this provision cannot exceed 0.5% of the 2011-2012 base MBR. Number 2, if your district does not operate a high school and is not a member of a regional school district, and your October 2010 designated high school students have decreased from the prior year, your MBR, minimum budget requirement, is reduced by the 2010-2011 tuition rate for each such reduced count. However, the maximum reduction under this provision is 0.5% of the 2011-2012 base MBR. If your district, number 3, if your district falls under both of the above reduction options, the MBR, minimum budget requirement, is reduced up to 1%. C. Exemptions to MBR reductions. Number 1. The reduction options do not apply to the following districts. A. Those that are in the third year or more of being identified as in need of improvement under Section 10-223E of the Connecticut General Statutes. B. Those that are in safe harbor. C. Those identified as in need of improvement and have a Title I poverty rate of at least 10%. And D. Those districts having the 2011-2012 budgeted appropriation already approved at or above the 2011-2012 base MBR, minimum budget requirement. D. Closure of schools. The new legislation also provides the opportunity for districts to request of the Commissioner of Education a reduction to the MBR as a result of closing schools due to declining enrollment. The Commissioner has sole discretion as to approving such requests. So that's the attachment. I'm not going to interpret any of this. That's all happening with the lawyers and the negotiators between the Board of Education, the town of Winchester, and the state of Connecticut. That's all happening now, and the fiscal conservatives are leading the push to tried to do it in such a way that we don't have a tax increase, we don't have to rob the fund balance, and we don't have to take any money from the town as they set it up when they set up the budget. Everybody else is trying to get more money from the state, saying certain things aren't legal, and I don't know the answer to any of that. I do have a lot of confidence in these fiscal conservatives, because even if they don't win this year, even if they lose a little bit, they are setting up the mechanism for managing the next budget, should they get in office, much more frugally, balanced, and for the benefit of not only the children, but the educators, the taxpayers, the town, the fund balance, etc. So now I'm going to read another paper to you. It'll be shown up here. That's the letter that we received this week, just a few days ago. Received a letter from the new Commissioner of Education. The last person we were dealing with up to a few days ago, he was a temporary Commissioner of Education. Forget the exact title. And they were waiting for the new Commissioner of Education to show up on September 28th, 2011. Our mayor, carbon copy, the Board of Selectmen, wrote a letter to a Mr. Stephan, S-T-E-F-A-N, Pryor, P-R-Y-O-R, Stephan Pryor, the new Commissioner of Education. Actually, I don't think he starts until a few more days yet. Saw that in an article in the paper today. So in a few more days, he will be there. The letter was sent a few days ago, so they'll be waiting for him when he gets there. Stephan Pryor, Commissioner of Education, State of Connecticut, P.O. Box 2219, 2219, Hartford, Connecticut, 06106. Subject, Town of Winchester, Minimum Budget Requirement, NBR. Dear Commissioner Pryor, Acting Commissioner George A. Coleman had written to the Town of Winchester on September 1st, 2011, regarding the 2011-2012 minimum budget requirement. Commissioner Coleman had asked the town to respond to his letter by October 1st, 2011. Those are the letters I've been reading over the last few weeks. At this time, says the mayor, the town is unable to provide a response to Commissioner Coleman's inquiries. I can assure you the town is taking the issue of the MBR very seriously, but can offer no solutions at this time. And I'm not privy to the private meetings they have, called executive sessions, or the discussions with their lawyers in these private meetings. But there is a difference of opinion here. All that, as I've been saying over the weeks, it all needs to be resolved. The next step will be an answer from the commissioner, and they may or may not want to come in and more actively participate in the review of the Board of Education spending and budget for the year 2011-2012. We don't know. just a guess. We'll find out. I'll read the letter to you when it comes in. One of the newspapers did call the state, and they said Mr. Stephen Pryor had not started work yet and wouldn't for a few more days, but they were taking the letter and thinking about it. We'll present it to him when he came, and then sooner or later we'll be getting a letter back. And the state had warned us that if we didn't get us that information, they would come in and pay closer attention to the detail. And I think the fiscal conservatives would welcome that, because the more they have looking at all our finances in the education area, the better off we'll be, because we'll get it all out on the table. We'll all know more about it. We can make more intelligent decisions. The state may agree with us on a lot of the things the fiscal conservatives want to do, and they may not agree with some. So all that's in the works. So we still don't know if we're going to have a tax increase, 6, 7, 8% or whatever, or have to take money from the state or from the town budget, or have to take money from the fund balance. We don't know any of that yet. That's up in the air. The town manager's looking at it, trying to come up with some straw men for that. The fiscal conservatives, 3 Republicans and 1 Democrat, Lisa Smith, are pretty sure that they're going to be safe harbor here when all the dust settles, which could take a long time. They have moved the money over to the general fund, all the state money, grants money, and all that. They're prepared to give it to the Board of Education on an as-needed basis. A letter from the state said they could do it on an as-needed basis. They don't have to give it all at once. I read you all those letters. You can get copies of them from the town manager or from the Board of Education, superintendent. But meanwhile, school is in session, has been now for a while. The teachers are working hard, as they always do. The students, I hope, are working hard. Many are. And life goes on. So the dust will settle here over the next 6 to 12 months, maybe longer, maybe less. And where you can help as voters is to get out and vote for the fiscal conservatives. Vote for who you want. But what I'm saying is, I am going to vote for fiscal conservatives no matter what party they belong to, Democrat or Republican, because that's critical for our town. If we don't vote them back into office, where they have control of the selectmen and the finance board, we're in for a long, long, tough financial problem for this town. There is no revenue in sight, additional revenue, profitable revenue. Matter of fact, might even be losing some. If we don't get our expenses under control, if we don't rebalance these budgets so the town has more money to spend, if we don't get that fund balance up a bit, hopefully by getting more revenue in, which I see no hope for over many, many years, we're going to be in serious trouble here. So you might as well face that right now at election time. So what I want to do now is I want to put up the election ballot. You see it there. You won't be able to read all this because I couldn't get it in such a way that you could read it. So I'm going to read it to you. And I'm going to take whatever remaining time we have to go through this, and till the end of the program, I might even come back next week and go over it again, because this is very, very important for you. You can get a copy of this ballot right now, anytime you want, down at the town hall in the office of the town clerk. You get a copy for yourself, study it, read it, talk to people about it. When people knock on your door that are running for office, whether you agree with them or not, it's probably best to open the door and talk to them, ask them questions, and try to understand their viewpoint rather than have somebody interpret their viewpoint that's running for against them. That doesn't make much sense. So the big spenders will be knocking on your door, and the fiscal conservatives will be knocking on your door. And I will now go through, by the way, sometimes there are wolves in sheep's clothing. You got to be careful of that, because if I said on my program a few years ago that I favored businessmen and businesswomen, everybody stops me on the street, the ladies do, and they say, you should say businesswomen as well as businessmen. So now I try to balance that as much as I can, unless I have a slip of the tongue. Everybody said, oh, I'm a businessman, I'm a businesswoman, from every party. Well, of course they weren't. But they said so anyway. And they fooled some people and they didn't fool others. But anyway, what we have on this ballot, the instructions are on the reverse side of the ballot that will help you in voting. I don't have that here. Maybe I'll bring it next time. But when you get the ballot, town hall, just tell them you want the instructions as well that are on the back, the reverse side of the ballot. This is the state of Connecticut official ballot, it says up in the left-hand corner. Winchester, Connecticut, municipal election, November 8th, 2011. I'm not exactly sure of the times now. I'll tell you that on a future program. Sometimes I think they're 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., and the decisions are usually read that night unless there's a tie or something like that. But I'll correct that if I'm wrong. And they're usually held at the Pearson School. But I'll get that up hopefully next week for you so I can make sure I give you the right scoop. All right, so across the top, you have the offices that people are running for in our town. The first 5 slots there are for a 2-year term beginning in 2011, right after the election in November, for selectmen of the town, who also happen to be the finance board. And that's very, very important that you understand that, because the finance board is key to a discuss of our future here. And having big spenders on a finance board is not my cup of tea. And I'm not a Tea Party person, I'm just a fiscal conservative. So you got to be careful when you vote for selectmen. That really should say selectmen / finance board, because each of these selectmen will be a member of the finance board for a 2-year term. You can vote for any 5 that are in this whole area here, and I'll just go over them with you quickly. You can vote for the Democrats, which I call the big spenders: Perez, Clausen, Welcome, DeVita, and Renzullo. Or you can vote, you can vote for Karen Beadle, Marcia Sterling. They're the Republican line. That's row B. The big spenders are on row A. Glenn Albanesius. Karen and Glenn are already sitting selectmen, as are Perez, Clausen, and Renzullo, the Democrat big spenders. Or Kenneth Fracasso, who was our mayor last time around, did a good job. He's a Republican selectman this time around, running again. And then on the Winston Independent Party line, they have endorsed Karen Beadle, that's row C, Marcia Sterling, row C, Glenn S. Albanesius, row C, and Kenneth Fracasso, row C. So you can vote either the Republican line, row B, for them, or you can vote on the Winston Independent line for them as well. Now, as far as I can see here, the Democrats, big spenders, have not been endorsed by any other party. So they're only available on row A. I advise you to avoid row A. That's what I would do. You got to vote your own conscience in your own pocketbook in your own way. But a lot of people ask me for my advice, have over the years, continue to do so, so I'll give it. But do what you think is best for your family, your town, your pocketbook. The Winston Independents, I already said to them. The petitioning candidates, Lisa Renee Smith, who's a fiscal conservative, disowned by the Democratic Party. They didn't want to back her during this election. Big mistake, in my opinion. I think she's more valuable as a Democrat. She's a sitting selectman right now. More valuable than the other three big spending Democrats put together. Lisa Smith is a hard worker. She does her homework. She works hard, dedicates herself to the job, and deserves to be reelected. In my opinion, I'll be voting for Lisa Smith. Then we move to the next line, which is the town clerk line. It's very thin there. Town clerk, 2-year term, begins 2012. Row A, the big spender Democrat line, is 6A is Sheila S. Sedlak. She's the existing town clerk, has been for quite a few years. And she'll be running against David Capabianca, who everyone knows. He's been around a long time, served our community for 20 or more years, has been a selectman many times, been on other boards and commissions, committees, and he's running against Sheila. The last time the Republicans endorsed Sheila, this time they're running their own strong candidate, David Capabianca. So you get a choice there of two people. There is nobody else running for town clerk. Now, as far as Board of Education is concerned, I'm kind of writing that off because it's lopsided now. Big spenders are there more than fiscal conservatives by a large margin. I don't see us having a very good Board of Education next time around as far as fiscal conservatism, efficient running, and openness and cooperation is concerned. That's my view. So I won't be voting for most of these people, but there aren't that many people running, and almost all of them are going to get in one way or another because there's enough seats open. But I'll just go through them quickly if I can pronounce it right. And the big spending line is Monique Parks Abreu. I don't know whether she's a fiscal conservative or a big spender. The time will tell. Susan B. Hofnagel, who I think is a big spender, and I call her Toffee Nagel because she's an attorney and has a hard time not saying, well, maybe this or maybe that. Petitioning candidates, both of whom I value highly. One is James Nichols Roberts. He's a very, very smart person, has a program on Channel 13 you can watch each week to see what his views are. He's a fiscal conservative. And Mary Ellen Pratt Valio. I think there's hope there. She has a lot to learn about the education system and the Board of Education, but I'm thinking she's up to it, and I probably would vote for her. So I say vote row B, vote row C, and vote row D, and you can't go wrong there. Petitioning candidates, Joseph Stephen Hanachek, who ran as a Republican last time. They didn't endorse him this time. He's running as a petitioning candidate, and will most likely, as all the other ones, get in one way or the other. So you have 5 people running for 4 seats here on the Board of Education that are 4 terms. Then you have one person, Brian Shaughnessy, Democrat, big spender probably, running for the Board of Education to fill a vacancy for 2 years, and you can vote for one of those. Now, I'm not going to go into, I don't have time to go into the constables this time. Maybe I'll mention them next time. But there are people running for constable, 2-year term, begin 2/11, vote for any 2. And again, I would probably vote, haven't totally made up my mind, but I would vote row B or vote row C for that. And I try to avoid voting on the Democratic big spender line unless I'm sure people are fiscal conservatives, but I don't think they are. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much for watching the program tonight. Be sure to vote on November 8th and vote either. My suggestion is you consider very, very carefully voting for the fiscal conservatives, row B, C, and D. They're very simple. Just go in there and vote row C, everybody, row D, and row B, C, and D. Thank you very much. See you next week.